Welcome to Mysterium, where we taste the wonder and mystery of all of this. What is this? In this video, we will explore imaginal perception as a lens that's fitting for the kind of reality that we happen to find ourselves in. Let's have a quick overview of the groundwork we've laid in part 1 and 2. If you haven't seen those videos yet, you can check them out at the top right corner or in the video description below. In part 1, we explored how reality is not static, not composed of completely isolated parts, and not accurately perceived by our senses alone. Rather, reality is dynamic, in process, and deeply relational, and it's more comprehensible to our imagination working with our senses. Reality is made of verbs, not nouns, and there's stability, but stability in flux, distinct processes unfolding. I want to make it explicit that reality at every scale is also multi-aspectual and multi-layered. I will call this a processual reality. In part 2, we explored how imagination is central to our experience and understanding, and therefore crucial to our flourishing as deeply embedded beings within and of the cosmos. Imagination is the faculty that presences what is absent to our sense perceptions by both revealing and creating. It fills in and colors in our experiences and is a wellspring of possibilities through our creative participation. We are steeped in imagination. If I've successfully conveyed myself in part 1 and 2 and you've been following along, I imagine you can see where this is going. A reality that is dynamic and relational and consists of unfolding processes necessitates a lens of perception that is flexible, unbounded, and fluid, which happens to be some of the inherent qualities of our own imagination. A reductionist, mechanical worldview is one way of imagining, our left hemisphere's way of carving reality into manipulable parts, and a necessary one for when we require control and utility. But life in its fullness yearns for more than control and utility. Life calls us to feel, to love, to dance, to experience, to express, to be. To envision and realize a meaningful future that reflects our innate potential as conscious, creative, feeling and thinking beings who can feel into the mystery from which we emerged. What kind of lens does a processual reality call for? One that's aware that our everyday lives are dripping in imagination and holds both perspectives of either or and both and, parts and wholes, with a leaning towards relations, integration, and wholeness. This is imaginal perception, a lens that can embrace the nonlinear contours of an interconnected, processual reality that consists of embedded entities from the quantum to the cosmos. As I've learned from Tom Cheetham's Imaginal Love, the imaginal is best understood in contrast with the literal. The literal is akin to the idol and the imaginal is akin to the icon. The idol you look at and the icon you look through. The idol of God represents God, while the icon of God is what points and orients one to God. The idol itself is worshipped, while the icon presences God. Cheetham writes, quote, "The goal of incarnate life is to be in love with the world. Such a life, quote, in sympathy with beings, end quote, is lived in love. But, Corban warns us, this can go off wrong in two ways. You can love a being without perceiving its transcendence. Then you experience it as opaque, static, and fixed. Then it becomes an idol and you become an idolater, a fundamentalist. Or you can be so in love with transcendence itself that you ignore the present reality of the being through whom the transcendence must be manifested. Then the icon loses its grounding in the world. This is the trap of a disembodied spirituality that attempts to transcend the world without ever living in it. Both of these mistakes occur with distressing regularity in the lives, and especially in the love lives of all of us. The first, when we mistake lust for love and turn the lover into an object. The second, when we are so dumbstruck by the aura of the angel manifesting in a human being that we cannot see the concrete person through whom she shines. In both cases, Korban tells us, we become incapable of real sympathy for the beings among whom we move and breathe. Real sympathy for the world, incarnate sympathy, requires a perpetual dance, a rhythmic call, and response between you and the others who share your world. It is a, quote, conspiracy, end quote, and mutual breathing in and out. In the Islamic doctrine of perpetual creation that Korban relies on, every being is at each instant simultaneously descending to earth and ascending to heaven. And the friction this creates provides the light and the energy to keep all of creation in existence. Idolatry is the futile and destructive attempt to grind it all to a halt and plunge us into darkness by severing the connection between transcendence and immanence, between the present moment and the eternal. This happens whether your idols are made of the literal dead matter of modernist science or the disembodied spirits of a distant heaven. End quote. How do we avoid the trap of the icon that detaches us from the embodied world? By recognizing that we are each an embedded, embodied, enacted, extended, and emotional being. We are a nexus of continuously unfolding interrelations, and how we relate matters. Having good relationships matter, and that includes ourselves, fellow humans, other beings, and reality. Our participation, our actions in the world of flesh, blood, and earth matters. It keeps us grounded in relation and present with the reality that is unfolding before us. How do we avoid the trap of the idol that detaches us from the grand mystery? By recognizing that reality is continuously unfolding and complexifying, that it's imaginative and creative. Reality went from the undifferentiated energy of the early universe to a cosmos populated by roughly 10 to the power of 12 galaxies. That is a 1 followed by 12 zeros, which collectively contain 10 to the power of 24 stars. That is roughly 133,000 stars for each grain of sand on Earth's beaches and deserts. I don't know about you, but to me, these are dizzying numbers. And to add to the disorientation and get a sense of scale, an average-sized star can fit about 1 million Earths. Returning to the numbers, among those stars, there are potentially 10 to the power of 18 Earth-like planets out there fertile for conscious beings. And within a single human being of the 8 billion on Earth, there are about 10 to the power of 13 living cells. There are dizzying numbers within dizzying numbers. The early undifferentiated energy of the universe eventually evolved into a plethora of creative expressions, which includes conscious beings who can contemplate and trace their physical origins back to the cosmic ocean. Imagine all of the life on Earth, all of the different kinds and forms, colors, sounds, personalities, and lives within lives. Imagine all of the processes and activities unfolding from the quantum to the cosmos. Not to mention, conscious creative beings such as us humans can create artifacts. By this, I mean anything that requires conscious creativity, and these can interact with all that already naturally exists and further the process of complexification. An evolving creative reality necessitates an evolving comprehension, a living imagination that doesn't allow its substrates to die, to become opaque, static, and fixed, literal. Cheetham continues, quote, Hillman grounds Korban's work by driving home the distinction between the literal and the imaginal, and explaining to us that the literal is not to be confused with the concrete. Any reality supposed to be literal, this fact, this rock, this book, this truth, anything we try to pin down as stable, universal, and immutable, the rock-solid facts of existence, these are all abstractions. The literal is always abstract because reality is so much more than we can ever know or experience or imagine. Nothing stays put. Everything real, embodied, concrete, ramifies, multiplies, sends out roots and shoots and explodes into images. There is no end to telling the stories of persons and things. Only the fictive is concrete. That is why there is no end to the telling of stories, of people, of things. Fiction, myths, fairy tales, gossip, and rumors, these are the fictions of persons. The astounding richness of the stories science tells us and continues to tell us seemingly without end, these are some of the fictions of things. Nothing stays put. And this is why belief is such a dangerous thing. Belief is to the literal as imagination is to the fictive. Belief wants to know. The imagination wants to hear more stories, to unfold the endless tale of reality. And so the primary mode of being for humans has got to be listening. Not I think, therefore I am, but rather I listen, therefore I am. Pay attention and listen to the beings you love. Hear what they are telling you. Let the angel act on you. Through them, they will open you. End quote. Imagine an infinitely blooming flower. That's what our relationship with reality could be. As aspects and layers of reality are unveiled, and as imagination, understanding, and intimacy deepen, consciousness relates to and caresses reality, and reality's responses impinges upon consciousness. Both are complexifying in this reciprocal opening, continuously unfolding upon one another. We can cultivate this kind of reciprocal relationship with ourselves, others, and the world. As pointed to by the yin and yang symbol, wholeness or complexification occurs at the black integrative edge between yin and yang, which also encompasses the whole circle. All the magic is happening at the curved edge. Yin and yang corresponds to integration and differentiation, or modes of being of the right and left hemispheres, respectively. If you'd like to learn more about these concepts, you can watch these videos. The point that I want to make here is that this imaginal lens can dynamically hold both the icon and the idol, and in doing so, it avoids being trapped by either and keeps the tension at the critical edge where the magic unfolds. Just like how stars shine and sustain themselves through both the expansive force of nuclear fusion and the contractive force of gravity, how our lives are possible because of both expansion and contraction of our hearts and lungs, or how meaningful dialogue holds both speaking and listening. Literalism is mistaking language for what language itself points to. The map is not the terrain. These spoken and written words gesture toward the phenomena. They are not the phenomena themselves. Literalism turns words as icons into idols. The error here is mistaking words, which are always inherently partial and static, as being able to adequately represent a processual reality, which is always interconnected and in flux. Words are fundamentally inadequate. Our processual reality is always beyond the grasps of our concepts, and that's the uncertainty we must live with and abide in. An adage that captures the critical edge here is, strong opinions loosely held. In archery, we need to know how to aim and how to let go. The words we use aren't merely utterances or symbols. They can both reveal and shape how we're imagining reality. So, if we want to align our imagination with a processual reality, the words we use must reflect such a reality. There are 3 practices that I'd like to share. First, cultivating a kind of thinking that thinks in terms of verbs rather than nouns, and in terms of relations, processes unfolding, and interconnected systems rather than static, fixed, and isolated parts. This requires looking at and looking through phenomena to see the phenomenon itself and its interrelations and unfolding. Second, balancing abstract words with words that reflect actual phenomena, such as infused, dripping, steeped, pointing, unfolding, contracting, and expanding. And also developing an appreciation for metaphors as a way for words to transcend the partiality of concepts by reaching and pointing towards the mystery and wholeness. William Blake, pointing to this, he wrote, quote, "To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour." End quote. Third, cultivating our attention and interoceptive skills to avoid being unconsciously steered by our unconscious imagination. Emotions can flood our conscious experience and color our imagination, ensnaring us in outdated or dysfunctional ways of imagining the present moment. For example, mistakenly reacting with anger to someone because of unresolved resentments, becoming defensive in conversations because of unconscious shame, or feeling fear and anxiety in doing something because of unresolved internal energies. Being swept by these turbulent waves restrains us from enacting our free will to consciously imagine and access new possibilities that open up to our flourishing. For me, I had to develop these contemplative skills to become more aware of and in tune with my body, and thus my emotions. And I still have a long way to go, but the path so far has felt like a process of incineration, distillation, and electrification. On how crippling emotion freezes imagination, Cheetham writes, quote, "Mostly what prevents our opening to the richness and complexity of the world is not intellectual hesitation or inadequate critical distinctions, but a dysfunction and crippling of the emotions. It is, as Jung would have it, usually the feeling function that is out of order. We wall off portions of our inner life because they hurt. It happens unconsciously for the most part, and for a while it works. But because everything is connected in unknown and unpredictable ways, the frozen parts of our life begin to spread. Cramped, crippled, dead, and cold, whole terrains of our experience begin to solidify. This is one way that literalism begins to dominate the imagination. And static imagination is not imagination at all. It is dogma and ideology. It gives rise to idolatry. The world becomes opaque as our emotional responses narrow in range and become automatic reflexes. In an opaque world, the boundaries of everything are clear and distinct. We know where we stand. We know the facts. My mother is a witch. My boss is an ogre. My neighbor is a fool. My wife is a nag. My mistress is Aphrodite. My God is great. You see how attractive this is? It is simple, clear, and reliable. You never have to move outside your comfort zone." End quote. When our emotions become automatic reflexes and fly under the radar of our awareness, that's when the frostbite begins to creep. We can become trapped, enclosed, and steered by our own unconscious imagination and detached from the present moment, while the frostbite creeps into the rest of our lives. Imagine a person who's driven predominantly by their automatic reflexes of fear, anger, shame, or anxiety. As their imagination loses its flexibility and fluidity, and thus their worldview becomes more literal, they become more predictable and unidimensional in their behavior. Literalizing ourselves, others, and the world seems to be part of the process of how we get in our own way, and at worst, entrap ourselves and fortify the trap door. The enemy will remain as the enemy. The victim will remain as the victim. The impossible will remain as the impossible. Fates sealed away by literalizing life. Being aware of our emotions keeps our imagination liquid and prevents us from being blindly driven by our unconscious imagination and literalization of reality. Awareness is necessary for any real change to occur. Awareness before change, easily remembered as ABC. The purpose of these practices is ultimately towards reintegrating ourselves with reality and realizing our embeddedness, so that our actions can become aligned with this mysterious, complexifying reality. By reimagining ourselves and our relations, we loosen the imagined rigid boundaries between subjects and objects, the byproducts of literalism, and we begin to presence what's actually there: interrelatedness, embeddedness, processes unfolding, and a responsive reality that seems to gesture in synchronicities. We have seen the consequences of the fundamental incompatibility between our concepts and reality. Fundamental partiality cannot, by itself, hold interconnectedness. Our blindness to the tendrils of interrelations that trail embedded entities has led to unintended incidents such as the ozone layer depletion, killing of sparrows exacerbating famine, and deaths, deformities, and damage as a result of polluting the air, water, and earth that were embedded within. These are examples of physical relations. Imagine examples of psychological relations, the traumas that have been passed down and across generations. Now imagine spiritual relations, being disconnected from the reality from which we emerged. I have a sense that systems thinking can open up systems feeling, and doing both is essentially spirituality, being able to feel and relate to the parts and the whole of reality. Let's reimagine your concept of yourself. What happens when you turn your imaginal eye onto yourself? Who are you? What are you? Where do you actually begin and end? Is there a you without the sun and plants? Without your heart and lungs that contract and expand on their own, or the 60 trillion cells you are composed of? How about without the internet? Without the farmers, machines, delivery person, and store clerks? Without all the people who contribute to the running of our civilization? Without the people who conceptualize and actualize all the concepts we use today, such as freedom, liberty, justice, and peace? How about without the accidents that led to discoveries like penicillin, X-rays, LSD, and Velcro? Without the collision between Earth and Theia that formed the moon? Without the asteroids that wiped out all the land dinosaurs? Or without all the events and unfolding we have absolutely no idea of? What happens when you trace your origins through your parents, family, lineage, evolution, Earth, the sun, exploding stars, billion years of cosmic evolution, and feel into this? Who are you? What are you? I don't know if I successfully conveyed the relationship I'm trying to presence, but this is what I mean when I say we are nexuses of continuously unfolding interrelations. Reality is as much in us as we are in reality. This individual will that we each have is embedded in the tapestry of reality. And just like reality itself, we're capable of both destruction and creation, dividing and uniting, differentiating and integrating. Just like how we can observe the process of complexification unfolding throughout reality, we ourselves, through our aligned will, can actualize the process within ourselves and within the world. We can choose to participate in creating, presencing, and actualizing the true, the good, and the beautiful. Only we can save ourselves from ourselves. We can begin by reimagining ourselves, others, and the world, presencing the sacred, embodying that vision, and participating in the unfolding. This is not an invitation to fantasize, but rather an invitation to align our perceptions with an interconnected, responsive, and processual reality that is continuously unfolding in the present. Thank you for watching. If this resonated with you, please like, comment, and subscribe. I'd love to hear about your experiences with seeing through the Imaginal lens. Until next time, listen, feel, imagine, think, and repeat. Take care.